Welcome to We Digress with Joy and Jess. Join hosts and longtime friends Joy Simpson and Jess Perry as they tackle the stuff of life the only way they know how, with honesty, faith, and humor. This is We Digress with Joy and Jess.
Hey everybody, welcome to We Digress with Joy and Jess. I'm Joy.
And I am Jess.
You hesitated like me. Good job, Jessica. Now they have consistency.
Oh, I was trying so hard to come right in.
I know.
We have a running joke. We're going to get there.
As you guys can see, it is not just Jess and I today. We have a very special guest. We have Maza Zimmerman. He is a dear friend of mine. I met him through my god sister Tramika and Corral, which is now JMNS that you guys have heard us talk about on the show before. He is a phenomenal vocalist, conductor, arranger, but also a father, husband, friend, minister, all of the above. And he worked through the pandemic as a restaurant in the restaurant industry. And I know you saw a lot of the ups and downs of that and dealing with staff and things like that. So we'll definitely ask him that. So everybody, welcome Maza Zimmerman.
Woo woo! Hello. We don't have our studio audience yet, so it'll just have to be
not yet. I could have done the ear horns though.
I should have you know she doesn't bring out the fake air horns for just anybody. So far, it's just been her mom. So you are in rarefied air, my friend. Yeah,
it definitely is. So, ladies and gentlemen, we wanted to get a man's perspective on a few different things. We always talk about women in ministry. We talk about faith. We talk about life. We talk about all these things. So we haven't had the opportunity to talk to a man about certain things. And there are men out there who have various views on women in ministry and all of that. So first of all, before we get too deep, I want Maza, I know I shared a little bit, but tell us all about yourself. I will say this, he has an adorable 2-year-old who I absolutely love. And her Instagram, her mom posts pictures and videos on Instagram and they make me laugh. And her mother is often trying to give her away to me. She's like, you can always come get her.
Yep,
Miss Carly.
You can always. It is always open. That invitation is always there.
I love it. She's such a funny little girl. I can't wait to see her. I haven't seen her since she was probably about 9 months, 10 months old.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So Maza, we'll start off with, I want you to kind of talk about how it was being in the restaurant industry really quick, just touch on that because we talked about the different fields that were affected by COVID, which a lot of our jobs were, including mine. I'm just back in the classroom and it's still day-to-day changes every single day. What were some of the highs and lows of restaurant management during COVID? Well, as we're still going through COVID.
Yeah, you hit it, then the nail on the coffin. It's still changing. You know, you're still adjusting to some may call it post-pandemic, but we're still in it, you know. I think the biggest change that we all had to get used to quickly was staffing, because that was one of the first changes that happened, like first day. All right, send all these emails, make all these phone calls, tell anyone they're furloughed. And so from a leader's perspective, having those difficult conversations, letting someone know not to report to work tomorrow. And it's going to be like that for possibly the next year. You know, that was the first tough part, just from a personal perspective and having to make those type of phone calls. And then for the business, it was, you got at the time, 75% of your building non-operational, right? So you went from, 250 some odd people in your building at any time to 5. And so that was a big sort of culture shock in a business that is fluent and fast paced and constantly moving and constantly operating for over 65 to 70% of your day. The operations is running.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, instead of closing at 11, 12 a.m., you're closing at 6. And, and instead of, and then there's the menu aspect of it where you streamline your menu and instantly half of your menu is cut.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then so all of those changes now we're supposed to educate our staff and educate our guests on all these new changes. And
Right.
you don't get time to prepare. You get an
Mm-hmm.
email that morning and you have to inform your guests and employees that afternoon.
Wow.
And so the learning aspect of it was trying is learning how to adapt to the response from your
Mm-hmm.
employees, response from the guests, response from your community, response from your home life. It all had, there was a two-part to all of it. And I
Right.
mean, it's still going on. We're still making
Yeah.
menu changes. We're still trying to find the balance of what good staffing looks like and
Mm-hmm.
how to do that and how to make money in this post pandemic, which in some cases was harder than the pandemic.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
just like we didn't get any sort of preparation for the pandemic, we didn't get any real preparation for the post pandemic. It was,
Mm.
all right, you open on the 15th, and we're like, wait, we're only about 50% staff. We're not ready for the
Mhm.
100% occupancy.
Yeah.
But there was no choice. You're not going to say no. You need to
Right.
make money and make money fast so you don't go under
Mm.
and end up having to close your doors, which a lot of companies are still having to do.
Right.
There are still restaurant concepts that I won't necessarily disclose, but are planning on shutting down
Yeah.
because they just can't make up the millions and millions and
Oh
millions
yeah.
of money lost versus 2019. Because
Yeah.
2020 didn't exist when it comes to cash flow. You got
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it would now, we're basing everything off of 2 years ago and still trying to hit 100% of that. And that's the
Wow.
challenge now. And you're still trying to hire. The only difference is we're not competing with unemployment anymore. So
Mm.
it was a lot of changes. And,
Yeah.
we're still losing staff and
Yeah.
we're still, people are saying, you know what, this was a lot and I don't think I can
And
do it
you
anymore.
work for a chain restaurant.
Yeah.
So I can imagine if a chain restaurant was having these issues, a lot of our local small businesses, small restaurants, I personally, Jessica and I have talked about this on the show. We did our best to try to support local. I did local, black owned, as much as possible because I know a lot of those things were having it really hard. But even when, we didn't go local, we still tried, if we weren't cooking at home, we tried to do the Uber Eats and the things like that to the bigger restaurants so that that can also, because some of even the bigger restaurants had to close because they couldn't get the staffing back.
Yep.
So I can just imagine what some of the smaller restaurants are going through. And with all of that going on, how did you balance family? Was ministry still involved at this point, or you were just like focused on
Oof.
work?
I have, uh, fortunately for me, I've been in the industry my entire marriage and the entire time I've known my wife.
Okay.
So she has had to adapt. She's already adapted to the hours,
Okay.
the working. Luckily for now, being a general manager, I don't have to work weekends anymore. But for the longest, I was at work missing birthdays, and she would be at whatever event representing the both of us.
Yeah.
And oh no, Maza's at work. Oh, when's he gonna get off? Well, he says 2, but that could easily be 8 o'clock. It was just that's how it was, and I was just fortunate enough not to have that affect my home life in a negative way
Oh, that's
because
a
she was
blessing.
already used to it. It's like, well, that's the way it is. Because when the pandemic first started, I was working 12, 13, 14, 15 hour shifts Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday back to back because staff was cut and we had to do what we had to do. And
Wow.
I'm the type of person where it's like, all right, that's a part of the job, so I'm gonna do it. Um,
Right.
but yeah, it wasn't as hard for me to adjust, but for other home lives, it
Yeah.
was because it
Yeah.
wasn't anything they were used to, and it's not why they got into the business in the first place.
Hmm.
Um, but for me, and I guess I can add, I was promoted twice in the pandemic, so regardless of whatever difficulty it was, maybe at home, it also came with growth in finances and,
Well, that's
development.
great. Yeah.
So it was a good plus to the, well,
Uh-huh.
you're working all those hours, but they still value you. They're still moving you forward in the company and they're still developing you. And I'm just fortunate enough to work for a company where the business never stopped, the development never stopped, the growth never stopped.
That's good. That's great. Jessica, you have anything to add?
Well, yeah, I was going to say you had mentioned one of the things is you talk about staffing challenges post, in the middle and maybe hopefully of the pandemic, and getting people back in. You said you're not dealing with unemployment, but you kind of alluded to people are just kind of burnt out of that. And I keep seeing this. There's this kind of question back and forth. Is it the fact that there were all the unemployment benefits for so long, all the extra COVID benefits, or I don't know. I'm kind of inclined to think that a lot of it, yeah, that might have been some of it, but people are just we're crunchy, we're burnt out, like
Yeah,
emotionally drained from dealing with all of it. And service industry in particular, y'all get the brunt of it in
yeah,
that industry too.
Right. Because you were essential.
yeah.
Essentially,
Yeah.
you were essential.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
We can talk later on that word and what it actually means.
Yes,
Right.
definitely talk on that because that was thrown around a lot. But then you have, like, in my neighborhood, the Ralph's closed because they didn't want to pay the extra for the essentials to keep working.
Yeah,
And so now our neighborhood is without a major grocery store.
yeah,
And so, yeah, it's crazy because, like Jessica was saying with staffing, there's no subs in LA Unified right now, really.
yeah,
They're doing a job fair for like 500 jobs. A lot of it has to do with sanitation and things like that because we don't have enough people to help clean. You
hmm
have kids back in school, and to me the sanitation situation is not where I think it should be for kids to be back in school. First of all, kids are already gross. We've already talked about that. We talk about this all the time. They're gross. They're germy. I
Adorable
mean, I
little
was
petri
talking to a
dishes.
parent today, and her son had like a snot ring on his mask. You know what I'm saying? Like, kids,
yeah,
no. So it wasn't, to me, there hasn't been enough sanitation. Luckily for me, I will say, our evening janitor, Mr. Love, he'll come up to me, Miss Joy, I wipe down those bathrooms real good because I think these kids deserve to go in the bathroom and have a clean bathroom. And I say, I
No.
appreciate you, Mr. Love. Thank you so much. My kids do deserve that. So you have those kind of but you have people, like you said, are burning out. I keep seeing all these TikToks of teachers quitting, packing
yeah,
up their classrooms and just gone
yeah,
because and it's not just the vaccination requirement, which is one thing, although they did extend it because as of today, it was supposed to be if you hadn't even had your first shot, you can't work for LA Unified
mm,
anymore. They extended it to be the first shot and they extended it through November, but then there are people who are still deciding not to get it, and that is their choice, but they're going to lose their jobs, unfortunately. And so you have people who are dealing with that mental anguish and burnout, and it's a lot of the teachers because back to back emails, like you said, emails coming every day, something's changing, something's different, and I've seen so many teachers packing up their stuff, and like I'm choosing myself and my family over this. It's
yeah,
not that I don't love my students, it's not that I don't even love teaching, but I don't even know how to teach anymore. Some of the teachers are like, and I felt that too. I told my boss, I don't even know what a good teacher or a bad teacher looks like right now because we're all kind of just existing. We're
yeah,
all just trying to
yep.
make it happen. So have you that I think in all around, just Jessica, you work for our university. By the way, Maza went to Cal State Fullerton across the street from where we went to school.
I mean,
We went
we'll
to
allow
Hope
it.
across the
That's okay.
street. That is, we are alumni of Hope International University.
I
But
used to
Maza
work
went
at that
to,
school.
There you go.
there it
AKA
is.
not the communications building, but everyone thought we were.
Right. Right. It's the school where the people like Jesus and get married usually within the first year. Anyway, that's a Christian college joke if you don't know. There's a whole thing about MRS degrees and all that other stuff. But, if you went to a Christian college, you know. But you went to Cal State Fullerton, so I wanted to put that out there after he transferred from El Camino. Um, being in hospitality,
Mhm.
coming from music, how did that transition kind of
Um,
just happen for you?
I think the transition was harder for everyone around me because I had been a part of music for my entire life, let's say. Um, for me, it was sort of an easy transition.
Okay.
Because I think the reason why it was easy is because I went from being primarily a choir director to manager. So it was a leadership transition. So it
Okay.
made the transition kind of seamless in a way where I'm just transferring what I learned on the podium into food and beverage, but I'm still leading people. And so
Okay.
it there were some uh I guess there was some you just kind of miss home where for the first time I wasn't really part of music at all in any aspect. It was
Mhm.
and then church shut down, so then I wasn't even sitting listening to a choir anymore. So it was
Right.
really kind of just non-existent in my life. But because of the demand of the role, I didn't really have time to process missing directing because I was
Mm.
so invested in being a leader in the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of my people skills and communication skills and listening skills all came from that podium time. And I mean, as you know, of being a musician, music is very diverse. And
Mm-hmm.
so you're working with all walks and backgrounds. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was easier for me to communicate and run a cook's line that was primarily of Latin descent because I was so used to communicating from every ethnicity and every
Mm-hmm.
background, and didn't that was never really a factor for me. So it
Mm-hmm.
made it
Mm-hmm.
for me. I think it gave me a strength in
Okay.
my
Mhm.
communication because I
That's
was on the
awesome.
podium for so long.
You had mentioned that you went from directing a choir into kind of a management position in the restaurant industry. Had you worked in restaurants prior, or was this kind of how did that come about?
So so how it came about was I was at Cal State Fullerton, and I just wasn't in a good spot. On the outside, everything seemed as if it was glitter and gold, and internally, I just wasn't happy with where I
Mm-hmm.
was as an individual and my role in my family, my role in my friendships, my role just in society in general. I just wasn't
Mm-hmm.
fulfilled. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and then I mean, I'll just be honest, my credit was jacked up. I mean, I could barely buy a sandwich with just my life in general. It just wasn't going the way I thought it should have been. So I took a step back and I said, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to become a server so I can build some income. And then through becoming a server, became a trainer. And then in becoming a trainer, the interest from my managers of me being a manager. And then once I became a manager, it was just this love of teaching and developing people and leading that I knew this is I've never felt that fulfillment before in all the
Mm-hmm.
years that I spent in music and just my impact and
Wow.
how I can change people and how I can make people think better and you know
Mm-hmm.
work the best way they possibly can. And then it was just finding a concept that I knew I can grow in. And then that's how I
Mm-hmm.
fell into Islands and it's been successful ever since.
That's
That's
wonderful.
awesome. I think the
It's
reason that the thing that intrigues me about that is because I know for a lot of us, the pandemic has meant a lot of pivoting
Hmm.
yes.
from maybe what we were doing to something different. And the hard part is finding places that see kind of the skills that we bring or the skills that someone brings, even if they don't have the direct experience.
Right.
And so I think there's a couple different tacks that people can take in getting their foot in the door, so to speak. And so for you, it really was just about kind of going back to basics and building on
Mm-hmm.
the leadership skills that you had and just doing the thing. It sounds like you didn't really go into this with an intent to kind of make this a
A career.
permanent pivot. This was
Not
Right.
true.
just I need to do the thing to make the ends meet.
Yeah.
Right.
And in it, God opens up this whole huge door for you to really thrive in
Yeah.
leadership and tap into this whole other side of you that was there all along. It just wasn't necessarily you didn't have the opportunity to stretch those muscles all the time. So
Right.
it's really interesting to me that you have really found this new passion, and for such a time as this. I mean, what a time to kind of start stretching
Right.
your wings in an
Right.
industry. I
Yeah.
mean, holy cow.
Right. And I think another part of that is I think that people often feel like ministry and leadership and servanthood, especially when you grew up in church and then accept your call and all of that, they expect it to look one way. And what you're doing, to me, is a part of ministry. You
Yeah.
are building, you are leading, you are being an example. Because knowing you personally, I know that you are yourself everywhere you go. It's not like you're going to be one way at work, one way at church, one way.
Yeah.
Like, one thing I can for sure say is you're going to be the same everywhere you go. So with that being said, I know that God's heart, the heart that you have for God and for people, is being exhibited in what you do in a professional world. And people sometimes forget, ministry really is not always in the pulpit. It is
Yeah.
podcasts. It is restaurant management. It is teaching. It
Yeah.
is all the different things that often people take for granted or don't think about, to use the opportunity to say, hey, I love Jesus. I don't have to shout Jesus at your face, but I can show you him through
Yeah.
how I walk and how I live and how I talk to you and how I treat you. And is that something that you feel like kind of is a part of what you do at work, even without
Oh,
it
most
being like a,
definitely. And
yeah.
without a doubt, it's funny you mentioned, or it may have been Jessica. You mentioned pivoting, and when I decided to take a step back when I was at Fullerton, one thing I noticed was that I wasn't going to church anymore,
Mm,
and I would only go on the Sundays that I was directing the choir, and which
mm,
was third Sundays, and then you would not catch me at a church first, second, fourth, fifth. It was nowhere to be found. And people started to notice that. Well, he only comes on third Sundays when he directs.
mhm,
And once I realized that I just wasn't happy, I said, well, I wanna go back to church before I have to crawl back to church.
mm.
And but I knew for me, I was gonna need some help. Because it was not going to be an immediate change that I was going to be able to just acclimate myself
Yeah.
suddenly. I needed help, and that's when I met my wife.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, it gave me an incentive to go to
Incentive.
church.
I'm not,
We
listen, there's
stand.
nothing wrong with it.
you
That's how
know,
many men have gotten saved.
yeah. And it was like pivot, and then out of that came, okay, I need an adult stable income, because if I'm going
Right.
to be someone's husband, I need to have an income, and I need to stand on my own too. Pivot,
Mhm.
management. All right, if
Yeah.
this is going to be a unit that we're going to start, I need to continue to progress, pivot. And so it all just worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
From the minute I decided to take that step back, it was just move after move, and it's just been continuing to just progress.
Isn't God
And
amazing that way?
yeah, it is.
He
It
does
really
things
is.
in ways that we don't think or think of, we don't think about or realize, are like, oh no, for real, this has really been your plan.
Yeah,
This is what you wanted me to see. And I can say, I saw you make these transitions, but I didn't know what the situation behind the transitions. I
yeah,
saw you pulling away, but I didn't know. And I will say there were assumptions as to what was going on. Like, why is Maza not showing up? Why is he not coming to choir? Why is he not, whatever. Um, but I will say, I'm glad you listened to God
yeah.
and not cared about what any of us thought.
And it was
Because,
everywhere. It wasn't
yeah,
your
I'm sure.
friends. It was family. Everyone was just kind of confused and trying so hard to push me back. And my wife was just I would go to her sometimes, and it's like, did you pray about it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You lead, you do what God wants you to do, and I'm right here, and that's how it was. And I never got that pushback from her. She always encouraged me to stay in it, and you should still,
Mm-hmm.
be a part of this or do a concert every now and again. But I've always been able. This is where God is leading me, and it was. Did you? As long as you prayed on it, then let's go. Let's
Yeah.
move.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Do you find that you miss the musicianship part of it?
I miss the podium. I miss the the choir part of it
Mm-hmm.
the most. Um, Running a
Classical or
rehearsal.
gospel or both?
Both. I think I miss because I was in love with rehearsals.
Yeah.
I never if I wanted to observe anything, oh, come to the concert. I'd really prefer to come to your rehearsal because I love
That's where the
that.
good stuff is.
Exactly.
That's where the meat is. That's where you really get to understand the process. That's the part I miss the most is just rehearsing. Like there's been times where I just want to call like 10 people and say, let's just run a rehearsal. I'm gonna just pick some random music and we're just gonna run a rehearsal for about an
Right.
hour or two and just dissect this as much as we possibly can. That's the part I miss the most.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
sitting in a theory class, I don't miss one bit. The sitting in a
I don't
musician
think
class,
anybody
I don't
misses
miss
that.
one bit. Music history, not one ounce
Despite the
of it.
theory book behind me, I'm with you. I totally.
Right. My
Yeah.
theory books are over to my right.
I,
Honestly, I get
I
it.
don't know where my theory books are. I'm not trying to find them. I don't miss that part at all.
How
But
I made it to orchestration, I have no idea because literally, I think Jesus helped me through my test because me in theory, I'm stressed.
yeah, I mean,
Stressed out.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I did it because I had to, but there was no part of me that wanted to teach music theory. No, I didn't want to do that.
Jessica's
Yeah.
a piano teacher, and I'm looking at her like, "Do you want to teach theory?"
Well, you know what? I do teach theory. And the thing for me that has been fun, and this I think kind of goes along with what you were talking about as far as leadership and how you're leading your people, is for me, when I first learned theory as a tiny piano student of, 5 or 6 or 7, it made no sense because I never understood the why. I just had
Mm,
teachers that taught me the concepts, like here's a chord progression and here's a grand cadence and here's what this is. But no one ever said here's what you can do with it and here's why it's important.
yeah.
And so
Uh-huh.
when I got to
Mhm.
college and I learned why it was important, and here's what I could do with it, suddenly the light bulb went off in my head about music because I was a classically trained piano player. If I didn't have sheet music in front of me forever, I would never be able to play anything. Now, that's not the case. And it's because of theory, really, is the way of doing it. So, the one thing that I do really enjoy about teaching theory is finding the thing that my kids love
Mm,
and then connecting the theory to it so
Mhm.
that they understand how it works in a much more holistic sense.
hmm
And to me, I don't necessarily care if they know the nuts and bolts of theory. If they decide that they want to pursue music, like vocationally, or if they want to go to school for it, they will learn that and that'll be fine. But I want them
Yeah.
to develop that passion for it, right? And to
Mhm.
know what they can do with it. And so to me, that's the fun part of theory. But there's a whole mess of stuff in this book back here that I have to refresh my memory on before I teach it because I'm like, I don't remember any of it. I'm like, I'm burnt. But I was teaching major seventh chords today and watching my students' eye glaze over, and I was like, I've done this wrong today. But no,
See, and I'm the
I
adult
think
that still
that's the
goes
fun
perfect
part.
chord NBC. That's what my brain
There you go.
immediately goes to. Like, it's yeah.
Yeah.
I'm still like, I see theory, and I'm like, okay, I can do it. I can do it. Oh, it's like automatic stress.
We were watching a video on YouTube the other day that had something about counterpoint. And my husband, who's an attorney by trade, was like, what's counterpoint? And I twitched a little inside and I was like, well, counterpoint is. And I was like,
You're a non-musician lawyer husband.
yes, but bless him, he'll because every once in a while YouTube, the algorithm is like, oh, you need to watch this. and then I'll sit there and watch it. And John's like, I don't understand a word of any of that. And I'm like, and now you know what it sounds like when you come home and you say all those Latin words. And I'm like, sounds good.
Like when you speak, lawyers speak. I don't know what that
Right.
means.
Like I've picked up a good amount of it. Like I understand a fair amount. And I used to work in HR, so I feel like I can at least smile and nod at the appropriate times. But yeah.
You know.
We're beginning of an old joke, like a pastor and a lawyer walk into a bar. And that's our
Oh my goodness. So you mentioned that you realized that you had only been going to church on the Sundays that you were directing. Um, when and how did you accept your call to ministry? Because you're a licensed ordained minister? Or
No.
which one? No, neither?
Neither.
I thought you were licensed for some reason.
Mm-mm.
Okay. Misinformation. All right. See, good to know. So have you then accepted a call to ministry, and what does that look like for you?
No, I mean, ministry for me, well, starting off was always music, and um, that's what got me into ministry. And that was my ministry. That was my calling.
Right.
Was being a choir director and being just a director in general. And then that transitioned into my calling into just leading people in general in whatever aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's that. But the music was the birth
Mm-hmm.
of it all. But as far as being like a leader in the church from a pastoral perspective, that I did one message or sermon for a special service we had. It was like young adult / youth Sunday, and I
Mm-hmm.
did it, and I loved it. But I loved it from the speaking aspect of it, of
mm-hmm.
addressing the people aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I always had a passion for speaking. I always had a passion for stuff like this and in
Mm-hmm.
good conversation. And so
Mm-hmm.
you put me in front of a bunch of people and just give me a topic and we'll make something happen. And so that's why I loved it. And just being the person I am, I instantly thought, ooh, well, maybe God is calling me to be a pastor. It was like, wait a minute now. No, not put that into the universe. Let me stand back and think about that.
You're like, let me rewind that.
You didn't hear that, did you? And then it was just that's where the passion came from. Is just
Okay.
I
Okay.
just love you know
It's
speaking
your
in
love
front
for
of
people
people.
and wanting to share
Yeah,
with people.
and breaking
And
stuff down.
at the end of the day, licensed or unlicensed, that's what a minister, someone who shares the good news, is someone who is able to speak and to demand a crowd and to inspire and all these things. So I see it. I won't put pastor out there
Oh
for you,
yeah, don't
but
somebody may hear that.
Right. But those are a lot of those same things. You definitely use those skills and exercise those muscles all the time,
oh, for sure.
as a leader of people, because I imagine that there have been some pretty heavy morale moments
Oh
over
yeah.
the past however many months. And
Yeah.
you've needed to kind of rally the troops and inspire and, lovingly or not so lovingly, maybe, I don't even know, like kick somebody in the pants. Like how do those same skills transfer to leading people kind of in that more intimate, I would say intimate or maybe direct is probably a better way of, it's a less HR crazy way of saying, like connecting with your team and inspiring and leading your team.
I've one, and you say HR because that's always. I feel like in this industry or in the work industry, HR has become a much bigger
Mm-hmm.
just topic in general in
Yeah.
the work industry with this generation and in the society that we're in now. Everything has to run through HR, and so
Mhm.
part of teaching my assistant managers is teaching them how to speak to employees, keeping HR in mind.
Right.
But for me, I've always trust myself in what comes out of my mouth, and I've learned to slow down to just
Mhm.
process. But I think for me, and through this entire pandemic, it was always or I've tried to focus on the person rather than the employee. And when I
Right.
do that, I don't even really have to think about HR because I'm
Okay.
always genuinely invested and concerned about the person and how the person is doing. Because in return, I get a better employee. And so whenever I'm having a sit down, and whether it be a difficult conversation or praising someone for their work, I'm always praising Joy and not
Mm,
my server Joy. And
mm-hmm.
so they tend to internalize it better, and the trust is valued, and the response is honest. And it's just a safer way to have a conversation, because I've noticed that when you're so focused on, I don't want to offend, I don't want to be inappropriate,
Right.
you end
Mm-hmm.
up being inappropriate and you end
Right.
up
Yes.
offending someone. When
Yeah.
Yeah.
you keep that in the forefront of your mind, it's like, just communicate to the person. Tell them
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you want to say. Of course, it's always in a respectful manner, but what's the problem? Oh, I'm having difficulties with this employee. Well, tell them that. I'm having difficulties with you
Right.
as of late. Well, why are you having difficulties with them? They're always late. You've been late consistently for at least about a week now. What's
Mm.
going? And then center it to the person. What's
What's going
going
on?
on?
Mm-hmm.
How are
Right.
you doing? Because of
Mm-hmm.
A, B, and C, this is what I observed, and I want to check in. And so that's what's kept it easier for me, to
Yeah.
have those type of conversations. And um, I guess to touch back to where it stemmed from, as far as a minister, from a ministry perspective, of just doing it with love. And that's a word that I don't feel we say enough in the work
Mm-hmm.
industry, because we're so focused on HR and not having to say anything. And it's like, love shouldn't be a bad word.
Yeah.
I love my team members. I love my staff. And I'm okay going into work saying, no, I love you guys.
Yeah.
And that may mean this isn't a good fit for you.
Right.
And I say it just like that, you know,
I would totally take that and be like, you know what? Thank you.
right?
you know,
That's that's
you're
it.
right. People can internalize that or accept it better than coming from a standardized way versus a personalized way.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I'm thinking about my own job as you're talking, and I'm like, you could do a training on
Yeah.
how to leave companies with love and genuinely do it.
Yeah.
Um, because you have people who do it and they say that that's what they're doing, or they care about their team members, or they care about their staff, but their actions aren't consistent with their words. And just in general, in these last few years, and not just because of social media and things, we just all need to be better at being consistent,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
because that goes to character. Your consistency almost always goes back to character as well, and your integrity and all of those things. So if your boss is saying one thing and then their actions are something else, how is, you as an employee, you as a church member, you as a, because it can correlate to all aspects of life. How do I go to my pastor and say, what I need to say, not sure exactly who I'm going to get? Or how do I go to my boss and I say what I need to say? And how, I don't know exactly how you're going to respond. Are you going to be honest with me, tell me one thing, and then tell your boss something else? All of these different, because trust me, I've experienced it
Yeah.
all,
Right.
you know? And so I think I appreciate that way much more. And it's something to me, for me to aspire to just in general. We have things coming up. I may have to, Jessica and I might have to have a team of volunteers to help us with our conference. I want to make sure that I'm not snapping, but I'm giving you instruction with love and genuinely doing it and letting you know. I mean, I try to do that with my students, and they're like, oh, you're not supposed to. It's really hard not to hug kids though, even though they're gross. I'm such a mama bear that I just want to,
Mm-hmm.
you're crying and I want to hold you, but COVID rules and I can't.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
like I can't. So some of my kids, they've learned to do air hugs. They try to do that. um I genuinely love them. Like, I had to tell my older fourth and fifth grade, first of all, y'all pray for me, fourth and fifth grade girls. I don't know. I don't know why
I
they,
don't know.
they
This
act
is a
like
little
they're
preview for you.
17. I
Right.
don't know. I have a fourth grader whose nails are as long as mine. Why are your nails this long and you can't do your math? Like I don't it's not connecting. And then you have an attitude. And I had a student a few years ago. I always tell them she walked in my classroom one day, was like, I said, oh no, you're gonna go outside and you're gonna start that over because you don't bring that in my class. I don't know what that is, but Lakeisha's not in here and you're not gonna talk to anybody that way. But these girls are like 10 times worse than the clapping girl. And I'm like, so this week I had to tell them, I said, you know what? We have a show coming up, and performing is a privilege and not a right. You can still be in the show, but I will pull big parts. And it will be the day of the show, and you decide that you want to act up, I will pull you out of the show. And it's not that I don't think you're talented. It's not that I don't think you're amazing. You guys are all very amazing. And I love you so much, but I do not appreciate your behavior.
Right.
And I have a couple kids who have been with me for a few years, and he turned around. He said, "Oh, she's not playing. She will pull you out."
At least he
I
vouched
was.
for you.
He was like, I was one of those people who got pulled out the day of the show, and I was devastated. I didn't think that there were going to be consequences for my actions. They thought it was all talk, but he was like, "She does love us, though, because I do." But it's hard, especially in art, my industry, to do that with kids nowadays because you have so many rules, so many HR, so many parent things, what you can't say, what you can't. I've taken in the last 6 weeks about 8 trainings on sexual abuse, child
Mm.
abuse, risk management, and
Yeah.
this is for school. You know,
Yeah.
so it's. I love seeing that you are um, a man in the field doing things with love because you don't always see men just having an open heart like that to do it and just be out there and don't feel like they have to be some standard of what a man should or they've been told a man looks like. You know what I'm saying? Like to me, that's another part of it to see you actually thriving and doing things like that. And it doesn't mean I'm any less of a power to the women. It doesn't mean any of that because everybody knows I am. But I appreciate seeing men being men and taking the role of leadership in a way that God has shown you and doing it the way that is personal to you so that you can inspire and help somebody else. That is amazing because it's not you're not doing it for yourself. You're
Yeah.
truly not doing it for yourself, and that's obvious in the way that you talk about what you do.
Thank you.
You know,
That was my
with
TED
all
Talk.
of the changes that have been going on over the past, 20 months or so, but then kind of the consistent changes that keep getting thrown, going from masks recommended to masks required in certain counties to whatever tier we were in when we
Vaccination
were in the
required
tier
because that's
system.
coming for restaurants too.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just like all of these things that you have to constantly manage that aren't your core business because your core business is essentially the restaurant
Food.
itself.
Yeah.
But now you've got all this extra stuff. How are you finding the ability to balance kind of keeping the main thing, while at the same time dealing with all this other kind of
Extras.
external, like, gobbledygook that keeps getting tossed into the mix?
Um, I mean, overall, it's sometimes it's frustrating
Hmm.
because it's I tell my staff whenever there's a new update, I'm like, look, I slang burgers and fries. I'm not like I don't work for the health department. I don't. That's not why I got into the business.
Right.
Um, and it's another layer to what we do, and you make it. It's kind of like a crayon,
Hmm.
and there's blue, and then there's baby blue, and the difference between baby blue and blue is baby blue has a mask and blue doesn't. And so the challenge or what I try to do is instead of coloring our operations with blue, now we have to color our operations using baby blue
Mm.
and don't think of it as an external component of what we're doing. It's a part of what we do now. And so you have to kind of let it manage itself, so you don't have to sit here and try to
Mm.
give extra effort in having to worry about them, providing excellent service and wearing their mask. Just
Mm.
teaching them that providing excellent service now is wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And that's the baby blue that we have to use. Blue doesn't exist. Get blue out of your mind until that becomes the new norm.
Right.
Because the
Right.
norm now is baby blue. And so when you do that, it doesn't require you to have to manage it. It's just a part of the culture now.
Right.
It's not a part of the culture that we asked for, but it's a
Right.
culture that we have to adapt and we have to create and we have to mold and we have to teach. And so you're reinventing this wheel that you need to operate and roll, because you can't focus on the wheels. You're behind the steering wheel and you need your wheels to just turn. So I need you to throw away those old tires and I need you to get these new tires, because we're trying to go on a destination. And so
Mm-hmm.
Right.
that's
Right.
that's what it's been for me, and this staff has accepted it, and now it's just, and sometimes you have to kind of, hey, put that blue down, remember we use baby blue. But
Mm.
it's much easier to manage, and it's much better for your sanity, because I think that's the component that a lot of just people in general missed. And I think that's what kind of drive them crazy, and just the exhaustion, and just I can't do this anymore, is because you kept thinking it as something that was going to go away, so you kept it to the side. No,
Yeah.
incorporate it in everything that you do, so it becomes a part of what you do and who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So, in having now kind of inadvertently become an expert in constant change, which I feel like anybody in leadership, as particularly in service industries
Yeah.
and hospitality, has kind of by nature become an expert in change. What do you think is the has been kind of the key to um, surviving change and
Mm.
thriving in change? In kind of that chaos that change can bring. What would be the key takeaways for you on how to survive and thrive in the middle of that?
Mm. I, I feel like the given answer is staying positive, and sometimes I know
Mm-hmm.
that's the hardest thing to do, is to stay positive and knowing, like for me, I still have a job. The job is still functioning.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that don't have that.
Right.
There's a lot of people that jobs close down and they're in whole new careers now, because
Yeah.
their career just doesn't exist anymore. You've got people who've been working in buffets their entire lives, and now that aspect of food and beverage doesn't exist
That's
anymore.
right. Yeah.
And
Mm.
you've got the employees and you've got the owners. You've got, whoever the owner of Hometown Buffet is, whoever the owner of all these other chains that have been around for decades, and
Right.
now that just is a thing of the past.
Yeah.
And so for me, one is just staying positive. Two, I've probably done more check-ins with my employees than I have ever done, and the check-ins are a lot more personal than they've ever been, of just how are you doing. I,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so many, the pandemic affected everyone in a different way. Some of
Right.
it was relationships, some of it was financial, some of it was family, some of it was location, some of
Mm-hmm.
it was death. And so they're carrying all of that baggage in with
Yeah.
them every time they clock in, because the old saying of leave your troubles at the door, it just doesn't exist. And I
No.
Yeah.
wish we can just throw that saying away, because it is just so far from being true. Whatever you have, you take with you, and that's
Yeah.
what makes you who you are. And so checking in with people, doing more stuff like buying donuts for the crew, celebrating small goals. We just had a big back of house appreciation company wide, so
I
just
saw that you got them a cake and everything. That was so
yeah,
cool.
making that a big deal. having more competitions in the workspace, just trying to make it more fun than you've ever had to make it,
Yeah.
and then not losing sight of that,
Yeah.
because you make that this is an opportunity for change. And so let's reinvent and let's recreate this industry because we've had to. And so
Yeah.
let's think about fun in a way we didn't have to. Let's think about the employee in a way that we've never had to, because the focus has been so guest and customer driven. And through this pandemic, it's been much harder on the employee side of it. So now let's kind of reinvent our theme. Let's reinvent
Mm-hmm.
our mottos to show
Mm-hmm.
appreciation and priority to our employees, because without them, none of this exists.
Yeah.
And so I think that has kind of helped sustain throughout the pandemic, and just making it about the people and being more empathetic to a person's just overall concerns, their life, their troubles, their joys, their frowns, their smiles, and just making that a part of everything that we do, because that's in turn really what you get. You get all
Mm-hmm.
of that in the quality of service every single time.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. You talked about having more fun and having, doing enjoyable things and bringing levity to a high stress situation often. And it always surprises me how businesses kind of forsake the culture of fun. Like they don't pursue that as an
Mm-hmm.
initial strategy for employee retention or employee growth because I guess it's not professional. Um, but like one of the knocks against kind of the Silicon Valley, bros was that they all had like foosball tables in the office and there were,
Right.
whatever the joke was, ball pits or whatever it was. But like to me, as someone who has been in leadership positions, you always want to provide an opportunity. You don't want service in your purview to be like a life sentence and people to hate it because that affects quality of work and all
Right.
that kind of stuff. So do you think that we're going to see a transition back to employees? Because I think back to, I was working in human resources kind of early 2000s, 2000, 2001 through like 2009, I worked in HR. And we saw kind of towards the beginning of the decade where there was a lot of focus on employee like perks and benefits and kind
Mm-hmm.
of the fun stuff as we came out of the kind of Y2K bubble. But
Mm-hmm.
then we've started to see it trend the other way for quite a while where there weren't employee perks and where businesses were
Mm-hmm.
cutting costs. 2008, when everything collapsed, it kind of went, we're cutting down all of the frivolous stuff and we're getting to the heart of the matter and bottom line, all that stuff. Do you think we're going
Mm-hmm.
to see an increase in kind of employee retention techniques in the sort of the soft skills, if you were the employee um, culture and things like that?
I Yes, I hope so. I think it's now is the opportunity more than ever to
Mm-hmm.
really kind of grasp that concept, and that way of running a business is thinking employee first. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the biggest thing that will hold up that process is being able to communicate that publicly,
Mm-hmm.
and not thinking that guests will see it as they're not important anymore, because guests in general hold that employees always right to heart, because it's been like that for so many years. And now switching
Yeah.
to a motto that doesn't have guest included, or
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
focuses on the satisfaction of their employment on their employees,
Mm-hmm.
it's that's I guess that's my hope, is that they'll be bold enough to publicly display that
Right.
vision, you know.
Yeah, you see less now. I remember, I think Jessica, I think that was a time where you would see, you even go in a restaurant, you see employee of the month plaques with the picture of the best server of the month and different things like that. And you're right, that we went through a decline in that type of thing. So I feel because people are still struggling. You mentioned earlier that people were either struggling financially, relationally, and then there were people who were struggling with all of those things at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
While we're all going through a trauma together as a world, not knowing what was going on, what this really was, and can this really be cured? And you're seeing things. Um, I think morale and the things that you're doing with your team, I hope that someone hears this and they go and they do that with their team at work, no matter what your industry is, because happy people make better staff. Happy
Yep.
people, you always get that person on the phone, you're calling about something, and you get the attitude person like, why do you have a customer service job if you don't like people? We
Yeah.
need, but we don't know what's going on behind the phone either.
Yep.
We don't know what their supervisors are doing. We don't know what they're home in. And you're right. I'm that person. I'm like, leave the drama at the door. Don't bring it in here. But as you were talking, I had to think about that's essentially what I started doing with Beauty Flawed. I had people asking me, like, why do you want to talk about flaws? Well, my flaws are what made me
Yeah.
who I am. I am healed and I'm whole and I'm healing continually. But those things, I can't erase it. It happened. Those things happen. All those physical scars, those emotional scars, all of those things happen.
Yep.
And when we don't talk about it, that's when we become complacent, number one, and two, we become bitter internally and not realize it, and we're acting off of internal bitterness that's coming outwardly to the other people. And when you put it out there, you say, this is what's going on with me, I'm going to be accountable to you. Like I could literally see an employee coming to you when they got to work and saying, you know what, I'm not having a good day, can I talk to you for a second before I go out there? Like, I can see something like that happening, and the way you've responded to them and the way you've been there for them shows them that they can bring their stuff, because their stuff is a part of them no matter what. They can bring their stuff, but you can still help them be great, even if it's just for a few hours and they have to go back and deal with their stuff.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. It's a great thing. Sometimes there is an appropriate place to leave something at the door, but we have to embrace truly understanding what our baggage is. We don't just throw baggage away. You take it out the suitcase, you look at what it is, decide whether it needs to be cleaned. You know what I'm saying? When you come back from a trip, you go through all the things. This goes to this, you goes back in the hanger, this goes. You got to look at all those things and do what's necessary in order for it to get in its proper place. So, yeah, that's good stuff. You mentioned earlier about the word essential and that you wanted to tap in on that. We have our idea of what we've been told socially, media, all of those things, what we believe um, the importance of the essential worker were. I'm one of those people. I appreciated all the grocery store people, whether they were a bagger, a checker, a stock person, the restaurants, the things like that. Though we appreciate you, we still don't know the half of what you guys have had to go through, and to be called essential constantly and things like that. And you kind of look like you had let me talk about that. So I want you to talk about that.
I mean, that's a whole nother We Digress episode. I mean, when you think of, I think there's two separate. There's essential, and then there's the worker, and they have yet to come together. And I think a lot of that has to do with the history in our country of what the worker was and how the worker was treated in comparison to the buyer. And so I think the foundation of what a essential worker is in our country is not what essential actually means. We have always been of service, providing for, in a lot of cases, a class of people who see themselves above us. And that's just the service industry in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so often we feel like we're last
The
place.
stepchild.
Kind of the stepchild kind of thing. I still think there should be a service day where the service industry is closed, shut down, and
Right.
we go to the beach, we do whatever,
You have the barbecues that you would have on the 4th of July, you know?
Yeah, because how many when you think of the service industry, and that's from the grocery store. Let's just start from the cart person who goes and gets the cart, and that's a whole nother episode too. Because I can't stand it when people leave their cart 5 feet from the hole. I put a Facebook post about that, but that's another. I digress.
It's
Um,
fine. We do it all the time.
but from the cart monitor to the person who's checking out people to the person that's working at Ross to the person that's working at Walmart, like the service industry in general. We've all, how many birthdays have we missed? How many holidays did we have to work and were required to work?
Mm,
How many weekend picnic beach days, movie premieres did we have to miss because any major event you need service?
right.
And that's the identity that we have created, is when there's
Mm,
a big event, somebody's got to serve us because this event is too big for us to serve ourselves. So we need
mm,
to hire a team so they can serve us at this event, whether that be a family dinner at Islands or a wedding or whatever the
mm,
case. We've created the identity where when you give something, there's some aspect of service that is
yeah.
required. Um,
Hmm.
and with the pandemic, it was. I don't want to get political, but when the shots came around, and it was all of a sudden essential was getting pushed further to the back, further to the back, and we're like, I thought we were essential.
Right.
Right.
What
Right.
what happened? And I was a bit annoyed, but at the same time, I was used to it, and
Mm,
that's just a part of it's kind of like as a leader, you give credit and you own up to the mistakes.
yeah.
When things
Yeah.
are bad, hey, I put that on me. And when things
Hmm.
are good, they're succeeding.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get used to projecting that positivity on other
Right.
people. And so you
Yeah.
kind of get used to, that's just the way it is. Whether it be right or wrong, I
Right.
think it's a huge opportunity for the essential workers to be priority to a certain extent.
Mm.
I think we need a holiday first and foremost. um,
I'm with it.
Well,
I
and
mean,
ironically,
there's
that was supposed to be Labor Day, but now everybody has to work on Labor Day,
because it's
Right.
an event and you got to serve. Right?
right?
And it's
Because we all
crazy how
need
much
hot
I've had
dog
to
buns.
explain what
Or,
Labor
yeah,
Day is.
yeah,
I'm like, if you have to go to work on Labor Day, how do you celebrate Labor Day? Like,
And
I don't work on Labor Day because they give teachers and students that off, but then
yeah,
you have restaurants open. So,
and it's become so a part of our identity that we're a part of it
yeah.
because now you have leaders who want to be open on Labor Day because that's money day.
hmm.
Everybody works now. So it's so part of the roots of our
Right.
society that
Right.
we are players of it.
Right.
We want to grab the controller and we want to go because that's just a part of our society now.
Yeah. That's like the greed of Black Friday to me has changed drastically in the last like 5, 6 years. Used to be the midnight will open and the people, and even with that, some of that is just a lot. But now, like the Fox Hills Mall, because I will never call it the Westfield Mall
No,
because I
it's
don't know what
forever
that is.
Fox Hills Mall.
It's forever Fox Hills, like whatever. But Fox Hills Mall, they now open certain stores at 9 o'clock on Christmas Day
Hmm.
in the evening to start Black Friday sales. You know, my mom and I have gone just to look a couple times, and there are people wrapped around buildings. There are people in the Target line. The Target is inside the mall. There's people outside waiting to get in the mall for Target. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? And then I have people like my god sister Jordan. She works at Ulta in the mall, and her hours are insane. One Christmas Day and Black Friday, I think she worked till close. She worked till like 6 a.m. on Black Friday, and then they had her come back Saturday evening to finish for Black Friday sales. She maybe essentially had 4 hours off between her shift.
Yeah.
And she had to go back to her service job because there were people who needed their sales. There were people who needed their this. There were people who needed that. And they needed her to stock, do stock, check out inventory to make sure they had enough. And it's just like, you're right. The owners, they're getting more and more into greed that they're not looking out always for the quote unquote essential workers. The
Or
people
their
who,
second.
yeah.
I sometimes when you just word things differently, the perspective is different. And
Mm-hmm.
when if you started every sentence with who you need to get this done, then it changes your perspective. So, we want to open up. Who do you need there first?
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, so I need employees to get up at 5 to be in the building by 6. All right, stop. Do you want to do that? Does that sound right? You need your employees to wake up at 5 to be there at 6 on Christmas Eve or on Black Friday. Before you get to the operations part,
Mm-hmm.
which seemingly is what you're thinking is most important, think about people first and what you need from the people, because every decision you make affects someone. Think about them first. Does that equation make sense?
Right.
But a lot of times we think of operations, or we want to open up at this
You're
time
right.
because we can do this and do this. Oh, and I need you to be there at 5 or 6. But you've already sold me with how much money we're going to make and the projected sales and this and that. People come
Mm-hmm.
last, and that's just the way it is. If you just flip
Mm-hmm.
the script, you get a completely different perspective of what that equation looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a completely different perspective on certain things that I didn't even think about. Like you think about it in essence, but you don't really think about it because I've never worked in service industry or hospitality or any of those things as a professional, job. My uncles, on the other hand, who one is now a teacher, the other is deceased, but they worked in clubs, restaurants. My whole life. I worked in one of their clubs when I was in college to make extra money. That was a special job. Anyway, it was just good. It was special. It was calling girls and tell them they could come to VIP, and they go, "Oh my God, are you serious tonight? Of course I can come." Like, oh my gosh, like that was my job. Anyway,
Moment of
but
silence for the boogie.
yes, moment of silence for the boogie. My uncle who passed, he was still working in the service industry until he passed, and he did a lot for his boss, who was rarely ever there. Essentially, without having ownership of the place, he was the guy, he was the person. And when he passed, they were trying to figure out a lot of different things that they didn't know how to do because they always depended on him to finish and do it. And though he made everybody feel like they were amazing, he made everyone feel special. He did that in our family. So I wasn't shocked that his job was like that. His birthday was the other day, and I had some of his friends posting like, "I miss him so much. He was the best boss. He was the best this, all of that." But though he trained the staff, the people who are the owners didn't really know how to do all the operations because they left it to him a lot of the time. And they would open when he'd say, "This isn't really going to be good for our staff. This isn't going to be good for our bartenders. What about our girls? What about," and they wouldn't always listen. And then, and my other uncle, who's a teacher, he was working there to kind of like make up some slack. And then they started depending on him too much. And he was like, "You know what? I can't. I have to walk away," because when you're not being appreciated and being even paid your worth, it's easy to be like, "I'm out." you know and with this going on and finances going on the way they are, I don't want to know what Black Friday is going to look like this year, honestly, because they're going to keep preying on people. They're going to still, I feel bad for the people who do have to get up at 5 a.m. to work at 6 a.m. from 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. You know what I'm saying? I'm being dramatic, but essentially a lot of them
It's not that far off, though.
working
Not at
those
all.
hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting thing. I mean, just from reading about all the backups at Port of Los Angeles and how many thousands of ships are backed up with merchandise. I
Yeah.
thought that I read thousands. I thought there's no way that can be an accurate number.
Did you see the picture though?
It's nuts. It's like all the way
The
down to like
shipping
San
crates just
Diego.
floating in the ocean.
Yeah.
Like,
it's crazy. I mean,
you go in your local Starbucks right now, they're out of a lot of things because of shipping and COVID.
It's on a container somewhere.
Yeah. And they can't get certain things. And you have people who are like, well, I need my such and such. And when are you going to get this?
Right.
And then people don't know how to act. Be kind. Everyone is short-staffed right now in the world. Be nice. Don't want her to spit in your coffee now. Like, though they wouldn't know. But I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking like, lady, I would make your coffee wrong on purpose. See, that's why I don't work in the service industry.
Petty party of joy. You bring up an interesting point. Like, everyone is short-staffed. So if there is a battle for staff, how do you differentiate yourself and retain and attract staff in an industry that already has like a, kind of a knock against it for being service industry, as far as like people not wanting to deal with Karens and stuff like that. And like, but how do you retain and attract talent in an industry where everybody is trying to attain and attract all that same talent?
Where I've been successful in growing increasing my staff is doing it internally through referrals. So I focus on what I have and making it the best environment and atmosphere to work in, not only in a pandemic, but just in general.
Mm-hmm.
And then you build through the roots you've already established.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a more successful way of doing it, because there's a connection already. It's kind of like just the natural process of growth. You're trying to plant new trees and hoping that they somehow intertwine. You've got roots already planted. It may seem like it's playing the long game, but it sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And it sustains much longer than always getting externals. And through that, you do get some externals that just walk in and just sense a better and feel a better building. But most of my hires, I would say close to upwards of 95% of my hires throughout this entire pandemic that have stayed, all been referrals from an existing employee that say, hey, like I have one core of employees. They take up about 40 to 50% of my front of house staff because they continue to bring in friends and they're all good candidates and they all stay and they all continue to get promoted. And so instead of trying to compete with, down the street or compete with unemployment at one point or compete with the concept right across the street, I'm going to focus on what I have internally and I'm going to build and stretch the roots that I already have. And we're just going to, and when you do that, you get more fruit naturally and you're able to produce fruit at a faster pace because there's already that connection there. They already have a reason to come because they've already have an established relationship with someone who works there. And so then it's easier to work on your morale, but, and I don't want to necessarily say, but it's also a more sensitive sometimes atmosphere because you affect one, you affect all.
Right.
And so you have to, keep the atmosphere honest and keep it safe. And that's been a big thing throughout this entire pandemic is a safe environment and a safe atmosphere to work in. Not only physically safe, but morally safe, emotionally safe, spiritually safe. Because the pandemic, like I said before, has affected everyone in different ways. But yeah, it's been, that's how I've been successful doing it.
Yeah.
I just hired someone today, as a matter of fact, who was a referral from someone else, and the
That's
referral was
awesome.
so far left. It was like, oh yeah, my mom has a friend who has a friend who knows a guy who works at Cheesecake Factory, and I reached out to this person, to that person, and said, you need to come work here. And it was just like, keep doing that. Like, that's how we build
Right.
That's so
business.
cool. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, there's, you don't realize how big your family actually is, and it's bigger. Your imagination knows how much bigger than the reality is,
Mm.
because everyone knows someone, and that is a potential family member that you can get in your establishment.
Yeah.
It's a
Wow.
distant cousin
That's
that can
great.
become a best friend very quickly.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, it's
That's
interesting
good
because I was
stuff.
telling my husband, I was like, every job I've gotten because I knew somebody.
Mhm.
I've never had any success off of a job board. I've never any of that stuff. It's been because
Mhm.
I knew someone who knew there was an opening or who reached out and said, hey, I heard you were looking, that sort
Mhm.
of thing. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's challenging. And for me in the season that I'm in, we're getting ready to move cross country. That's a challenge because I don't know anybody over there. So it makes for a different kind of dynamic. But at the
Mhm.
same time, for the most part, I've been very fortunate to have really great coworkers and great working environments and good jobs and things like that. So the value of relationship is
Mhm.
so
So important.
critical
Mhm.
in building good teams and in building like for your future because
Yeah.
right now you're in the position of managing and hiring, and it's a wonderful position, and we don't know what the future ever holds in any of these things, and so having the relationships developed now kind of future proofs whatever changes may come. Does something
Mhm.
get sold? Does a leadership change three tiers above you that completely changes the structure of things? And you need,
Right. Right.
we just don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes half the time, especially the last, year. So having those relationships, developed across that wide, 2 blocks over and across town and all that kind of stuff is really, I think, so important and sort of
Very
an
valuable.
under discussed, underdeveloped component to leadership, but then also towards just um, networking. It's all about networking, to use the annoying phrase of networking.
And it's funny. Like I'm listening and I'm enjoying this conversation actually a lot. Um, I can literally see you, and I'm not saying that this is God. This is just something that came in my mind, in my head, in my heart, and so I'm just gonna say it and get it out. I can see you not just training other stores in your company, but I can see you doing this as a leadership role and training other chains, other businesses in your model that you have set for your own personal store. Um, and you were talking about imagination sees this, and you've had the imagination to pull in all these people, but then I'm also thinking about the imagination that you have taken something and you have a model that I've seen that's different from a lot of people in various fields. And you've taken things from ministry, you've taken things from your musical background, you've taken all these things just mixed with just your personality and your passion for people, and you have made something very special. And I can see you doing this and training and contracting to other places, being able to share your perspective on how to run their companies' ministries effectively just by following certain small, simple things. Because we go to these things. I've been to so many leadership conferences, and sometimes it's just the simple things that changes something, that shifts the atmosphere, that does something that makes someone feel so special that they do their job 150% better than
Yeah.
they did it before. You have a better hostess at the door of the church when you tell her that she does the best handshakes and hugs. You know what I'm saying? Like
Hmm.
all of these things, and you can take that model that you have. So if I were you at some point, maybe write up what you've been doing and pray about it and see where God takes you. That's that's what was in here. So I'm gonna just,
Will do.
you
Will
know,
do.
get it out.
And in that vein, is there anything that, where can people find you and where can people connect with you and all that kind of good stuff. Because I'm sure you're going to have a lot of people going, hey, I want to work for you.
I want to work for that
guy.
Right?
Well, I have both of my social media platforms are public. So you can reach me by my first and last name, Maza Zimmerman, on Facebook, and then Instagram. I believe you can find me at Maza Zimmerman and at Mazaza, which is a backstory I won't get into, but Mazaza.
I think I have the Maza one.
Yeah, I have a leadership page with just very, very little, and when I say very little, it's like 2 things on there, a bit of content on there. But yeah, you can reach me on those 2, and I mean I'm on those every single day. So if someone were to send me a direct message or a comment, I'm gonna read it within, I would not even 24 hours. I'll probably read it within 12 hours.
Okay. All right, we'll be sure to put that information in our show notes.
Yeah.
For that too. But it has been so much fun to have you on the show. It's nice to have a boy in the room.
It was. We didn't get into the ministry part, but that just means we're gonna have to the ministry and your idea of women in ministry. But we'll just have to have you back on the show,
right?
We'll just have to have you back on.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I love this. I love anytime I get to sit down and have a great conversation with good people. It's always something I leave with. There's a part of this conversation that goes with me to work tomorrow, or that I take in once I leave this room and go home with my family. But yeah, it's been a pleasure. I loved every bit of it.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah.
It was great hearing your perspective and all of that. It's just been wonderful. And getting some insight from someone who's really been out there during this time. We've given our opinions, but we haven't had anyone talk to us about the realities of what we're going on from a service perspective. So that was really amazing. So we appreciate you. Thank you for coming back. And if you would love to come back, we want you.
Of course.
For sure. So
So if we've learned anything, it is be extra kind to those who are essential. Yes. Tip well. And
right. I was going to say that. Leave nice tips.
Right. All that kind of good stuff. Hey, we want to thank you guys so much for listening. And you can find us on social media at We Digress with Joy __ Jess on Instagram. You can find us at joyandjess.com. And if you want to leave a comment or you have a question or just something you want to say, you can leave us a voice message at joyandjess.com. And I think that's pretty much it. We're going to leave some notes so you know where to find Maza. And then, we'll see you next week.
See you next time.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Check us out on the web at joyandjess.com. That's JOIANDJESS.com. We'll see you next week.